Hello and welcome everybody to this special webinar event, Why DIY Feature Flags Don't Measure Up. Today's exciting webinar is sponsored by Harness and produced by Actual Tech Media. My name is Mackenzie Puddesy with Actual Tech Media, and I am excited to be your moderator for this conversation today. A study of 500 engineering leaders conducted by leaddev.com found that the vast majority of organizations succeeding with feature management and experimentation have one thing in common. They can measure errors, performance, and business impact at the feature level. However, of those without that kind of measurement capability, just a 1 in 6 record of success is shown with their initiatives. Even well-funded teams at large banks and telecommunication firms are shutting down their DIY feature flag platforms and replacing them with Split by Harness. Why? Well, in spite of all the investment, they are still unable to measure the impact of changes being rolled out by feature flags in a reliable and efficient way. Today, you'll learn about Split's release monitoring capabilities, where alerts don't just point to symptoms, but rather to the exact flag causing those symptoms. Likely that is why you're here. You're here to learn about the feature flags and improve their management in your organization. And luckily, we are going to hear from the team at Harness to provide the information you are seeking and so that you can learn some more. This is going to be such a cool conversation, and I cannot wait to get started. So let's zip through some of the final housekeeping here and then get things on our way. First, I want to draw your attention to the questions section of your webinar console. This is the best place to get involved, get interactive, and post all your insightful questions, comments, feedback, and ideas. We indeed do want to hear from you. So if you're out there now, why don't you find that questions tab, and let's start out by saying a quick hi, hello, hola, bonjour, aloha, and giving a wave to the community here with you today. Hello, hello. I see some of those coming in now. Awesome, awesome. As a quick side note, that window is also the best place to reach out and let us know if you have any technical issues during the session. Knock on wood, of course, that doesn't happen. But if any of those pesky tech gremlins do come on in, don't forget that a browser refresh should get rid of the usual problems with audio and visual. And if not, just shoot a message in that questions tab, and the Actual Tech Media team and myself are going to be here to help you out with that. And the last thing I want to point out on your audience console, nested in that same window, is the handouts tab. You can go and check out some cool resources and follow-ups to our conversation there today. Specifically, there are 3 handouts in there. There's a 2-pager overview of Split by Harness, the feature management and experimentation solution. Second, you'll see Split, free trial link so you can manage feature flags and measure what matters. And then also, there is a link there about protecting every rollout. You can learn about release monitoring and how it detects the impact of each feature on system performance and user behavior. So check all of that out. And again, that might become more relevant as you listen through the conversation here today. So keep your tabs on the handouts. And if all that cool content wasn't enough of a sweet giveaway, we also have a $250 Amazon gift card as a prize that'll be drawn at the end of today's webinar. Of course, you must be in attendance during the live event to qualify for the prize, and all winners must meet the Actual Tech Media prize terms and conditions. If you're not sure what those are, you can also find those in the handouts tab as well. Okay, and with that, I believe we've wrapped up the housekeeping, and we are going to shortly have our speakers on out here with you. I am excited to, one last thing, I almost forgot. We also have a $50 Amazon gift card going out for the best question asked. So we will be doing a live Q&A here today, and we would love to hear your insightful and thoughtful questions. So again, as a presentation rolls today, and you're hearing all the great info, keep in mind you will be able to pick the brains of our presenters. So, and with that, without further ado, let's get our presenters out here. As I fondly am going to refer to them as the Davids, we have David Caro, who's the Senior Manager of Product and Platform Marketing over at Harness, And then we have David Martin, who's the staff implementation engineer at Harness and also a total guru on Split by Harness, which you're going to learn about here in a second. So first, David Caro is going to set the stage for the presentation. Then David Martin is going to be showing off some of those capabilities of Split with a live demo. And then I'm going to join the two of them for some Q&A. So with that, David and David, why don't you take it away?
Thanks a lot. The title of today's presentation is Why DIY Feature Flags Don't Measure Up. So obviously we're talking about feature flags and measurement. It'll become more clear why that's important as we go through. Before we do though, I just want to kind of set a little bit of context about like why am I here, right? I've been giving talks for quite a few years on the value of being able to roll things out more quickly, more safely through using feature flags and measurement together. And what's interesting is that I've often showed this slide here, and you can kind of see on the down the left side, there's things you accomplish by using progressive delivery techniques. And there's multiple types of progressive delivery. And at the time, I was making the case for the further to the right, the better you are. And feature flags checked 3 of the 4 boxes, but they didn't check the 4th. And feature flags with integrated data checked all 4 of them. And what's interesting is that while many of us do use blue-green deployments or canary releases for various things, the use of feature flags for rolling out individual changes has pretty much become the norm. And it's really essential if you're doing things like trunk-based development. You've got to have feature flags, right? And so the great news is that people are using feature flags. The thing that we want to talk about today is how much more value you can get by going all the way to the right and actually having the ability to learn during the process. And most importantly, for us who are worried about releases, how do I learn during a gradual release so that I can find issues faster before I hurt very many users? So I'm excited that this recent study that we participated in uncovered what people are actually up to out there and what value they see in these practices. And what was interesting is, again, the role of measurement. So the first finding is that 79% of the people that were surveyed, and this was 500 engineering leaders, 79% saw risk mitigation and instant triage as a benefit of having feature level monitoring, being able to see at the feature level what's happening during a rollout. And almost as many, 78%, saw the ability to iterate and optimize, effectively do experimentation, try things, see how it works, and iterate, as a benefit of the same approach. I roll out with a feature flag, I measure at the level of that feature flag, I learn stuff, I do things, right? What's really interesting is that 82% of those who felt like they were successful in this practice have the ability to measure system performance and user behavior at the feature level. Right? They can actually see feature by feature what the impact of that feature's rollout is on system performance and user behavior. And only 16% of those who didn't have that ability felt like they were successful. So that's why I think it's exciting to have this conversation, which is like, this is one kind of binary differentiator in how you practice what you do that can make a massive difference on whether you're successful or not. And that's the ability to measure system performance and user behavior at the feature level. But I think it's useful to kind of, how do we solve this problem, right? So how do we go about measuring system performance and user behavior at the feature level? Well, let's just rewind for a second and kind of focus on what does what, right? Feature flags control who gets what. So they're very good at controlling at a low level granularity exactly which populations see a new feature, for instance. Measurement answers the question, and then what happened, right? So I've exposed this to say 5% of my users, then what happened, right? And the ability to measure at the feature level lets you answer that question. Now, let's take a scenario. If I send some users one way through my code and I send some users another way through my code, I want to know, did one group experience higher latency? Were there more errors on one side or the other? Does one side show higher engagement than the other? Did the old code or the new code lead to happier outcomes for the users? And did this partially rolled out change impact my cost to serve, for instance? Like if I rolled it out to 5 or 10% of my users, am I seeing a higher cost to serve for those users than I do for the rest? So if you only change one thing in 2 weeks, and I don't think many of us live in that world anymore, figuring out what happens along the way is pretty easy. It could take people and time. It's people and time intensive to do that, but you actually might enjoy solving that puzzle. Hey, we did this thing. We're kind of trying to figure out why these other things happened. Can we get to the bottom of it? What's going on? The thing is, that's one thing changed over a 2 week period, which again, most of us don't live in that world anymore. So what if your goal is to roll out 5 things in a day, or in an hour, or in a minute, then measurement gets hard. So that's the problem we want to solve. If you release 5 changes in an hour, how easy is it to quickly answer these questions? We're seeing higher latency in the last 45 minutes. Why? Why are we seeing that higher latency? Or what's causing the average engagement to drop today? Today's engagement's much lower than a typical, this day of the week. Or my cost to serve is going up faster than my traffic level. Why? How many people would it take to figure that out? You got 5 things going out at the same time and you're trying to get to the bottom of these things. How many people are you going to kind of fire drill together to figure it out? How many people would it take to answer those questions? And what's that cost? How many people are involved for how long? And what else are they not getting done, by the way? And if you did that daily, if every day your life was like that, where you have to drop what you're doing to figure out what it is, how many people would stick around? And what else could they be doing instead? And one thing that's exciting about, recently I joined Harness. I've been with Split for years, but Split joined Harness. And one of the things that's great about Harness's approach is, what if we automate the things that distract us from getting, flow, from getting real work done, and spend that time we save doing things that are of higher value, right? And that's what we're talking about. So feature flags with built-in measurement answer those sort of questions automatically, so your team can do other things like build the next feature. Now, one question that comes up is, well, when should we measure? And, with feature flags, you have the ability to decouple deploy from release. And so when you first deploy, there's no exposure to your users. The code's out there, but you haven't exposed your users. And when you're completely released, all the users have it. But in between, you have steps. And so what's really powerful is roll out to a small number of users, somewhere between 1 and 25%, kind of depends on how much volume you have. And your goal there is to mitigate error risk, right? I want to find things that we missed in testing, and I want to find these in production with as few users as possible, but I got to have some real users going through, and maybe to uncover things I didn't know in my testing. And then when I've done that and I've rolled out, maybe I want to stop sort of at 70 to 80% and go through a peak traffic period to mitigate scale risk. Does the change I make, did it affect our ability to serve at scale? And then in the middle there, kind of an optional step, depending on whether you're just trying to release something or whether you're trying to run an experiment, which is, I want to validate my hypothesis. I did this change to accomplish something. And when we get to a 50-50 split between who's getting a feature and not getting a feature, that's the most powerful way to actually measure that. And you'll see why in a minute. But these are kind of, when would I measure, right? So I'm measuring early on to look for errors and things that I hope weren't going to happen, to make sure they're not there before I expose it to more people. That's kind of limiting the blast radius, right? And I'm measuring later on, optionally for scale, and then I might be running an experiment in the middle. But how do we do this? So turns out experimentation science is a power tool here. So let's say you're rolling out a change, and we're calling that BFF 129, back end for front end 129. So we we give the on state to a subset of users. In this case, we're giving the on state to 5% of the users. And the randomization for who gets that is unique to BFF 129. And we'll see why that's important. But basically, we're going to know that if we're splitting up people to get this one change, 5% to 95%. And because we're doing that, we can filter out this change from the other changes, because we're going to randomize separately for other changes, so they're different sets of people. So those people getting off, let's say we observe the page load time kind of follows this distribution, and those people getting the on result in this distribution for page load time. And if you just glance at that, you can see that there's a difference, right? The system can do that for you automatically. So let's look at how that applies when you've got 5 changes happening roughly at the same time, right? So just a pop quiz, which of the gradual rollouts I'm about to show you is impacting the page load time? Right? It's pretty obvious. Here we're doing a visual comparison, but the system's doing this for you all the time. And so here I've rolled out 5 changes in the same hour, and none of those, except for BFF 129, are having a meaningful impact on page load times, but it sure is, right? And I've only rolled it out to 5%, so I'm not hurting a lot of people, but I now know this, and I can be alerted. I can even take automated action, right? That's what we're talking about. So how do I use this experimentation science to actually do this automatically for you, so that you don't have to figure it out on your own for every separate feature that you're rolling out every day? So Feature management experimentation solves that measurement problem at scale. No matter how many features you're rolling out, at whatever cadence, you're going to join the data about the feature flags, the data about performance and behavioral data, run them through the attribution engine, and you get release monitoring and experimentation just as a matter of business. It's just not something you have to set up or draw people in or plan for. It just happens because you're using these tools. And one thing I think that's really excited about the demo that David's going to show us in a minute is that something we've been calling Split Suite or SDK Suite basically sets you up so that you can add that measurement with no effort. Just by using the version of the SDK that has a built-in ability to capture performance and errors, you're still just using feature flags to gradually expose functionality, but that data will flow through. And not only will that data flow through, but it'll even create metrics automatically to measure those events. So there's like zero setup. So it's kind of like in the old days, we talk about the lights out or zero admin. That's the power of the SDK suite to make this practice just normal and not require you to follow a checklist or do extra work to make it happen. So really looking forward to David showing this in action. And let's move over to Dave now.
Thanks, Dave. And Dave is a tough act to follow, as you can tell. But what I'm going to do with you is what I think of as really I get the fun part to actually show you how things work together. And to set up the demonstration, we need some kind of an application to play with. So what we've got is a travel booking app that's trying to get people who are thinking about a trip to Madrid to commit to that trip. So there's a call to action at the top, and then there's an image associated with it. And then down below, that's the button we want them to click, the bookings button, right? So in another presentation, we would talk about optimizing the bookings. But today, what I want you to see is that as I reload this app, I have it's a 1 in 3 chance of getting different ideas of how to get people to click bookings. So this night page has one idea. We saw lunch already, and I think there is lurking in here or there the romantic sunset, right? So there's 3 treatments going on. And so I'm going to take you in detail how this is implemented. It doesn't look like a real travel booking site, I know, but it's been boiled down to the essence of our conversation, so you can actually see how these things are put together. So let's look at the flag. So the flag in this case, for legacy reasons, was called Enigma. So it was a bit of a puzzle, right? And this flag is in the staging environment. It's not promoted to production yet. If we look at its treatments, just like I said, there's not an on-off treatment. That's what you get by default when you're working with Harness. This one has 3 treatments, which we've just labeled red, green, and blue to easily differentiate them. Those treatments are associated with a dynamic config. So we could look at this dynamic config in a key value pair. This is one of our neat features, is that somebody who doesn't want to edit JSON can edit their releases directly. So maybe I think we don't need the word over. So if I click review changes here and save it, we now get a change to the call to action. If you've never seen that before, that's the dynamic config feature in action. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that today, but we'll see it when we get into the code. But the last thing to notice about the flag definition is that it's been put into an ABC test. So this is as close as you can get to 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. And that's very much the reason why when I reload this page, we're getting a different treatment with some random regularity because of how that is set up. So let's take a look at the page to see how it's put together. So I'm using HTML JavaScript for this example. We could have done server side. There's so many different options, but on the client side, the thing that you may not be doing, even if you're an existing customer, but you could be doing, is just what it's learning during the process that Dave Caro was just talking about. And to learn during the process, you need to capture some measurements. And so what we've done is we're including the browser suite instead of the SDK. This is the SDK by itself, commented out. And here's the browser suite, which is both the SDK and also the performance metrics. So this makes it really easy. Um, the second thing that I'll call out that I did in order for my page to work the way I wanted it to is I'm generating a UUID as a user ID. With each page load, I make up a new user ID. And that's because if we get to the split initialization, and again, there's more conversation here, but probably for a different demonstration, the user ID gets passed to split. And so split treats each page load as like an anonymous user, a whole new user visiting. And that's why it gets bucketed differently each time. If we made that user ID static, uh, the tool would choose a treatment for that user and then stick to it. It would be deterministically the same each time. So if I come down further in the page, we get to two different important bits of action. The page gets drawn using splits get treatment with config. So this is what's pulling back the JSON. And the way that we use that JSON is we break it apart. So here's the parse. And then we break it apart into the image and the source that we saw. So here's, the text, and that's what's going to become the call to action on the page. And then the URL becomes the source for the image. And that's why the page changes with each treatment. There's some events getting sent down here, including if a user clicks on the bookings button, we're sending a note to Split saying that we'd like that book to appear as a metric. This is what you would do if you wanted to engage in measurement without the browser suite and the SDK suite. So that's something that we can talk about too. So I'll come back to the page. All right, so one thing that I wanted to show you was no metrics here. Everything blank except for the ones I made down below, right? But Harness FME is a little bit more clever than me. When I reloaded this page a couple of times in preparing for this, that traffic was enough to generate the metrics. So this is a big part of the automatic aspect of release monitoring. These metrics were set up to look at a particular event that's going to come from the performance infrastructure. This one's CLS is one of the events from Web Vitals, and it's taking the average of that event. So this is something that ordinarily you would be expected to set up and to set up for at least once for each event that you're capturing. But you don't need to worry about that with the suite. So those metrics are there. So now what I'm going to do next is I'm actually going to show you what's really going on at a traffic level from the application. So I'm going to make a new window here, and I'm going to put the data hub in the window. So the data hub, by the way, is this link here on the nav bar. You can click to live tail, and for one window, we'll capture the impressions. This is the record of a user being evaluated, so we'll know exactly what treatment they got. And then over here, this is my other window, so I'll do one more. There we go. And we go to the data hub, and we go to the production environment. Actually, I think what I want to do is I want to switch to my workshop, and then I will go to data hub, and I'll go to live tail. Okay. In stage, that's where I have things now. So we'll go ahead and run this. And now, back in the window, if I reload, there's a little bit of delay, but we should start to see the events coming across. So there they are. So all those events that you're seeing here right now are coming from release monitoring, right? This is what was auto captured. You did not have to send these events. We in the source for the page you saw, there's nothing about turning on, even on the error, we didn't capture any of that, right? So if we look at what's in an event, one of these auto captured events, let's look at the error. It's telling us in its properties the user agent, a message. In this case, it was the script error that was on the page. That was what was baked in. And then the connection type and a URL for where the page was located, in case that helps you to find it. So these events are golden. With the events, we're going to be able to actually measure just the way we've been looking to. We're going to measure across all these events. So I'm going to reload a couple more times to capture some more events. Let's look at, yeah, okay, so here's the impressions coming in. So one quick thing to note about the impressions is you're seeing them come in twos, Enigma and Erratum. I went by it quickly, but on the source for the page, we're actually testing two different feature flags. One feature flag is the one that's displaying the three results. The other one is actually a trap. It's not realistic. That's why I didn't spend time on it. It's asking, should the page have an error? And then with some percentage of the time, when the page does have an error, it throws the error. And so that sets us up to set off an alert on errors, which we're going to. Okay, so I could go at this for a while. I'm going to show you if we come back to the flag definition that the flags each have a metrics impact page that's going to show the results. And the metrics impact page has experiment settings. So you can use the default global settings for your experiment, but you can also set it up to use sequential testing instead of fixed horizon, which gets, generally speaking, it's closer to what people want for getting results. And then the statistical significance. If you find that you're not reaching statistical significance, maybe you have a small sample size. Now this is saying it wants at least a sample of 30. You can adjust it. You can push it out to make it more relaxed. All these things you can play with, right? There's even some pretty advanced logic for situations where if you have enough metrics, you can run into false positives. So we correct for that. There's an algorithm for doing that. So I'll save these. All right, so on the results page, I don't actually need to calculate, but to show you what's possible with split here is you can say, okay, I've got my experiment going. I want the results right away. I could calculate just my key metrics, but that's not what's interesting to me right now. What's interesting to me is the guardrail metrics, right? So let's go see what's happening with the guardrail metrics. So we can come to each of our metric definitions, and this one's a guardrail metric, and this one's a guardrail metric, and guardrail metric. You want to make sure that the metrics are guardrail metrics. If you ever have to switch, this little pencil here lets you choose between whether it's a guardrail metric or not. It looks like our guardrail metrics are all set up here. So we're in good shape. So we'll go back to Enigma. So at this point, we're going to want to just bake the feature. So I'm going to go ahead and calculate for all the metrics, and then some time will need to pass before we see the result. So Dave, that's what I wanted to show you today. I may come back to show you the results afterwards, but this is my story.
Okay, great. So I think that David showed us a bunch of stuff there, and I think that we're going to go back and look at the results, I think, in a minute. Um, the thing to note there is that with the suite, just using, as you're familiar with feature flags, just using the feature flag tool to make decisions of what does or doesn't happen in the page is is what you're expecting to do, and at the same time, we're watching for errors and performance issues without you having to do anything extra. And I think in Dave's original plan for the demo, he was going to show you a screen with no metrics on it and then use the app, and then the metrics were going to appear. And the reason that's important to know is that normally there's like, oh, well, if you do this and you do that and you set these things up and twiddle this knob, you have all this great stuff. But the whole idea um, with his approach is we want those events to flow in without any extra work, and we want those metrics to be auto-created without any extra work. And that's the power of using the suite, is that you can adopt these practices without having to, get a master's in some new theory or have a checklist with 20 items on it, right? And so that is the whole idea. Is like, how do we make this a regular practice, and how do we reduce toil so that we can just do our work and get more value by having the system automate the stuff that needs to happen? So I'm just going to pause for a second and see It's sort of like a cooking show. Let's see how we're doing on on getting the data back.
Let's have a look. So I'm going to pull up Enigma, and now we see Enigma has um, 57 impressions associated with the blue users and 51 for the green users. There's a bunch of features to talk about separately, like the sample ratio. But what we now get is some populated
Wow.
guardrail metrics, right?
Yes, I'm looking at that, David. I like that. So clearly, we got a big red metric there, right? So what's that 105% telling us?
That the
What?
largest contentful paint doubled in latency for the again the blue users as compared to the green users.
Great. So now let's flip over to the other flag. Remember, there were two flags rolling out into the same app. So let's go over to the other flag. And while this one is called erratum, assume this is my favorite feature or whatever. It's not, it wouldn't be called erratum because we wouldn't be deliberately causing errors. But like, so it so happens that this particular feature that was rolled into the app at around the same time is prone with errors. And I think one time you've described this as this app is hemorrhaging errors, right? So much higher error count. So, but what's the LCP number on from this flag's perspective? What's its effect on largest contentful paint?
Uh, Negligible. It's statistically insignificant. That's one of the yellow metrics that you see.
All right, so we know that this flag is not causing the largest contentful paint to change, but it is causing errors. Let's go back and look at Enigma again.
Okay.
And here, let's have a look at how the errors are on Enigma. So if we look for the error count, where's that?
Uh, it's right here.
Right, and it's right. So I just want to make sure that people get this. This is what's kind of magical about this, which is this is only two flags, but imagine you've got five flags that are all in the same app, right? What we know is that Enigma was having an effect on largest contentful paint, but it wasn't having a cause on errors. And we know that the other one was having was causing errors, but wasn't affecting large contentful paint. So we know what problems to solve where, not there's a bunch of problems, let's get to the bottom of it. So instead of a long war room or a postmortem of like unwinding all this, we already know literally on the fly what's happening. So let's have a look at the alert that you got um, uh, Eratum, big shocker that, the one that throws errors for a living, as a coincidence, caused enough errors that the system said, you know what? You've never even set a threshold for errors or anything. You just said, that's a guardrail metric for me. I want you to keep an eye on this. If it makes things better or worse, let me know. And sure enough, it said, wow, when this thing's running, it's throwing a lot more errors. You should look into it, right? And I think you've got a screenshot in there, David, of the monitoring tab. And if we go to the monitoring tab, let's try to make that a little bigger. Maybe stretch the window, maybe. Um, uh, the the table at the bottom of the monitoring tab has always had what we would call threshold alerts in it, which is if you've set a specific threshold for an alert, show me that it violated that. Very soon, it will also have the alerts you just saw in that email, which was if you just said this is a guardrail metric, if there's a major change, I don't even want to set a threshold, just let me know if there's a major change, let me know good or bad. Those will also be incorporated here. So this is literally on the finishing stages of going out. So that traffic over time shows you kind of who's coming through, and the alerts will show you what's going on, whether they're threshold alerts or they're guardrail alerts, right? So that is that's really the thing to take away is that we could have, we have two flags here, but what if we had, you know, 30 things going on at the same time? We have customers with 200 changes of an app in the same quarter, and they want to know what's causing what, so the right team can get to it and they can fix it. So
Thanks, Dave. It's a very important thing to highlight. It's one of the hardest things about measuring, um, not just feature flags, but in general, is understanding the interactions and how those interactions can be separated to understand in this case, the impact of that feature. So it's
yeah,
fantastic.
cool. If people heard the phrase, correlation is not causation. Things happening at the same time doesn't mean they're actually being caused by each other. We're trying to flip that around and focus. How can I really focus on causation? How can I isolate things from each other? Remember, in my slide deck, we were talking about how by randomizing those populations differently. When we split the population that got the error flag yes or no and that got the different treatments, sunset, night, or whatever, we were randomizing with a different seed. So those are literally different populations, and they're different enough that they sort of cancel each other out from their own perspective. So the error guy doesn't really, it's not going to matter if sunset or not from his perspective as much because he's evenly spread across all three of those. And likewise, the sunset guy is evenly, they're randomizing different groups, right? And so that's why we could isolate. And it looks kind of like magic, but it's just stats. So yeah, but I think the thing people need to know, yes, the thing we know is the whole goal is again back to less toil, less things should happen so you can focus on your job, not on troubleshooting and triage, right? So sometimes I'll ask at a conference, how many people have been in a war room for an hour or 2 hours or a day, and I usually raise both hands, because it's not fun. It's kind of exciting the first time you do it, maybe, but it's not how you want to spend most of your days, right? And so I kind of get back to what I was saying about, if you have to be firefighting every time you do a release, first of all, people won't really want to do releases, right? Second of all, they're not going to get very much work done because they're spent all the time going back to fixing things, right? So we're just trying to set you up so you can spend more time in flow, and waste less time on the chaos, right? So thanks so much, David, for showing us those live screens. Totally appreciate it.
Thank
Um,
you, Dave.
oh well, it's team effort, right? Right?
Teamwork makes the dream work, right? That's the keep on hearing
All right. Well,
people
we
say
should
these
take it. We
days.
should wrap it up and get to some of the Q&A real quick, and then I'm sure that people who are hoping that they're going to get a shot at the prize will have a shot at that too.
Alrighty, David. Yeah, we've got a couple of questions that have come in, so if you can field a few of those, that would be great. How does that sound?
Sure, let's go for it.
Alrighty. So first one I've got is, do I need a data scientist in order to use this?
So sometimes when I show slides with the distributions and with the things going on, people think, "Oh, and it's an experimentation engine." The answer is no. In fact, it's always been designed for dev teams, for engineering teams, product people too, but literally the whole idea is data scientists should like it and approve of it and agree that it's making the right math, but you shouldn't need a data scientist to actually set it up or use it or interpret it, right? So that's the design. And sometimes we go deep with people about, well, how does this work and how does that work? But a user doesn't need to bring in a data science to make it work or to understand the results.
Okay. So it might impress a data scientist, but we don't need one to make it work.
Yeah, we don't want to make them angry.
I like it. Perfect. Okay, next question I have here is, does this support mobile apps?
For sure. So when we look at the suite, it actually covers browsers, Android, and iOS. And with mobile, it's kind of important because the you've got the app stores to deal with, and so one of the magics we didn't talk about this a lot in today, but like the fact that you can turn things on and off very quickly with feature flags is more important with mobile than it is with a browser, really, because it can't push new code the way you can with a browser with mobile. You got to get through the app store. So absolutely, it does work for mobile, and it's kind of more important there.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I like that. Okay, next question I have is there a way I can learn more without speaking to a sales rep first?
I think I've never heard this kind of a question before. Just kidding. Yeah, I get it. So a couple things. One is David Martin is actually giving approximately, I think, once a month webinars. They're called Harness 101, where you can actually attend a webinar without having to get into a sales conversation, and you can ask questions. And it's basically a casual way to get together with a group of people and ask questions, somewhat anonymously, right? Um, the other thing is that the free account that you get if you go, Split is becoming part of Harness, but there's still a separate website for starting a free account. It's just split.io. You can get there from either side. But if you open a free account, that free account has all of this functionality. So you could actually do exactly what David did in his demo today, and see how this works. And so, yeah, you have multiple options. Attend the 101s or do a trial account.
Nice. And then when you say all this functionality, like basically all the features. You can use everything that you would in the full version of the app.
Correct. For the first 30 for the first 30 days, you get everything. And then if you were to stay on the free tier, there are some limits to what you could do that are kind of reasonable. But yes, for the first 30 days, you're basically all in.
Nice. Awesome. Well, I think we'll wrap things up there, but is there any kind of final call to action or, if people are really keen to check out the demo or take the plunge, what would you say? Where would you send them?
Yeah, I would definitely, if you go to harness.io and choose feature management and experimentation from the product menu, you can kind of learn more, see what's going on. You'll find links there for signing up for a free account or for getting a demo. I'd also point out that, our topic was DIY flags not measure up. Some people have spent a lot of time and energy building some amazing DIY systems, and we have two of our largest customers that did exactly that. They built a very full-featured feature flag system that was pretty high end, but they couldn't crack the measurement issue. And that's really why we do these talks, which is that those are companies that had a giant budget and a lot of people dedicated to building it, and they shut that off and migrated onto using this approach because we have measurement figured out. It just comes with a solution. And they're repurposing those people into doing something else, which again kind of feeds into our mantra, which is like free people up from the toil or from the thing that's not really adding value and do the things that adds value. So I hope that kind of wraps a little bow around the whole thing. I appreciate everybody joining. And I know you want to wrap it up with a little end of the webinar stuff at this point. Yeah.
Sure thing. I'll let you take off, and we'll give away a prize and have a little fun. But beyond that, it's been great to have you and have David as well.
All right.
Thanks so
Awesome.
much.
Thanks for your time.
A pleasure. All righty, David and David, thank you so much. David Martin had to drop a little bit early, so we didn't get to have him in for Q&A, but so great to pick your brains. Such a great presentation. And I love that kind of final thought of, like using this software or software in general to automate and free up time so that we can start building the next feature and start doing the next thing. So if you're at all interested, we do have that QR code up there on the slide here still. So I'm going to be taking that down in just a second. So I suggest giving that a quick scan before it goes away, before we wrap things up here today. I want to sincerely thank both of you guys for being on here, letting me pick your brains. It's been fantastic. For everyone out in the audience there, I do want to remind you we've got the handouts in there. So not only do you have that QR up there to scan and check it out, you can actually access the free trial link through there. So if you are looking to get those 30 days and just start poking around, playing around, seeing if this is something for you, I would suggest you check that out there. There's also a 2-pager overview of Split by Harness. So again, the feature management and experimentation solution that David Martin was showing us there. There's a little bit of an overview that you can review and take those features back to your team or your CFOs or whoever needs to see it. And then finally, there's a protect every rollout link in there. So you might want to check that out as well. And again, before wrapping up, we're going to have a little bit of final fun, which is going to add to an already awesome webinar. And it is time for a prize giveaway. So going once, going twice. And finally, I'm going to leave you guys for the QR there. We are going to give away our $250 Amazon gift card. Reminder, you do need to be live and present here at the webinar to win. And without further ado, the winner is Heath Peak from Illinois. Huge congratulations, Heath. As always, we will be in touch about claiming your prize after the webinar. And we also have that Best Questions gift card for $50. You may be contacted about that if your question was selected as the best of the pack. So again, thank you so much. And on behalf of Actual Tech Media team, I want to thank Harness for making this webinar possible, especially our incredible speakers, David Caro and David Martin, who've given us so much to think about today. And hey, I want to send some big high fives and special thank yous out to all of you there for making this possible as well. As in, we need your attention. We need you to come in and be curious about these topics. And I know sometimes it's difficult to stop our daily grind and take a moment to strategize, to plan ahead, to think about what's out there. So thanks for pulling your heads up from your day-to-day of it all and making mental space in order to learn a little bit more about feature flags and how you can manage those and why DIY feature flags just don't add up. So I know I've learned a lot today from this session, and I hope you all have as well. I can't wait to see you all at a webinar again soon. And until then, I want to wish you an absolutely magical rest of your days. Take good care, everybody, and we'll see you soon.